Hello and welcome to the Unwanted Opinion podcast, the show in which me and my friends give our unwanted opinions on all things film. My name is Lewis and I'm joined today with Kyle.
Good evening. Yes, good
Good
evening.
evening and a happy new year. This is our first
Happy New
episode
Year.
of 2025. Yes. How was your New Year's
I
celebrations, Kyle?
was
How was everything?
sick, and you know this.
Yeah, I know. I
Just
just
rubbing it
wanted you
in my
to
face. Yeah, no,
to
unfortunately I got very unwell over the Christmas
Mhm,
break. Um, but it meant that I was able to kind of just. I say that I didn't even watch much because I was too unwell
mhm,
to.
mhm.
As Lewis will know that in the future we're going to be doing a Robert Eggers episode based on obviously what we're going to
Yes.
talk about today. And I
Yep.
haven't seen The Northman, and he was pushing me, and I was like,
Yeah.
I can't watch it. I'm too sick, and he was getting quite infuriated near the end.
I
But
didn't know how sick he was. I thought it was just like the sniffles, but it sounded
yeah,
like it was
no,
much worse.
no,
But
it felt
we're,
very bad. Yeah,
we're glad you're better and glad you're here for the show today.
yeah.
But yes, as Kyle suggested, and as you might have seen on this thumbnail or video title, that we were talking about Nosferatu, of course, the big horror film, the big horror remake, I guess, of one of the original vampire films ever made, ever put to film, Nosferatu 1922. And this is Robert Eggers' fourth film after, of course, The Witch. The Lighthouse and the Northman.
Yep.
So yeah, we're gonna get right into that. So I guess let's begin, right? So if you don't really know the story of Nosferatu, right? I mean,
Like
if you know the story
myself.
of Dracula, you know the story of Nosferatu, right? Because essentially, Nosferatu, the original one that came out 103 years ago now,
Yeah.
if we're in 2025, was basically filmmakers trying to get around using Bram Stoker's Dracula without having to, acquire the rights to it. Yes, all this rights bullshit in film was happening a century ago.
Yeah.
It's still going on today, of course, with all sorts of fairy tales and comic books and whatever else. But back then, they wanted to make German filmmaker Murnau wanted to make a vampire film. He wanted to make a Dracula film, and obviously Bram Stoker and his publisher wasn't having it. So he was like, you know what, I'm going to do it and just change the names essentially, which led to a whole
Yeah.
legal dispute way back then. But of course, the film was released, and it's to this day, it still astonishingly holds up. It's this entertaining, like 85-minute, basically blasting through the story of Dracula with some tweaks and changes and name changes and whatever else. But it's the way it's shot, the way it's put together, the way that it's expressed all through the sets and the theatrical performances. It's something that the remake does quite well, which we'll get into. All of that, it's such a creepy, weird film, and it still holds up 103 years later now. But now we jump to 2025,
Yeah.
we're released here in the UK, and so the story essentially follows this I say gothic, this possessed woman, Ellen Hunter, who's played by Lily Rose Depp,
Yep.
who encounters Count Orlok or Nosferatu years prior to the main events of the plot in a very, I guess, erotic, which then turns very dark and sinister very quickly, dream.
A very good
We
jump
then jump
scare. Yeah.
a very fantastic jump scare. Be warned, if you do not like jump scares, this might not be the film for you. But then we jump a few years later after that incident of her experience and premonition, I guess, of Count Orlok. And she's now married to Thomas Hutter. And he's a real estate agent, essentially, who then has to go off and is told by his boss, who's just called Knock, who's played by Simon McBurney, to basically go to this guy Count Orlok's house,
Hmm.
way off. It was a 6-week journey away up
Yeah.
north, right? And of course, when he goes and encounters him, he's a very, very strange, creepy, eerie figure who's really excellently sort of portrayed by the great Bill Skarsgård, who of
Incredible.
course played Pennywise back in the day, and upon meeting Kurlock to basically sell him this house in Thomas's own hometown, sets off sort of a chain of catastrophes
Yeah.
for his townsfolk and the people close to him. So that is a very brief synopsis for Nosferatu. Kyle, what did you make of Nosferatu?
Well, to start off with, Lewis, when we sat down in the theater, I turned to you and I was like, "What is
Mm.
the story of Dracula?" Because I I've got a very limited
Uh,
exposure to the vampire genre. Like I said,
yeah.
I probably at the time when I was getting into films, probably when Twilight came out, and I was like, no
Mm.
vampires for me. I'm sorry, I can't be bothered with
Mm.
that.
Mhm.
The closest thing I've seen to the full story of Dracula, as I've said, is the
Mm.
BBC
The BBC.
adaptation, where it does
Weird,
it
yeah.
does verge a
Yeah, okay.
little with the iPad. So I was kind of like to you, I was like, because in my head the story just
Mhm.
ends at that
Uh-huh.
castle, and I was like, I forgot about the whole boat trip, and I forgot about the whole movie. I was like, nothing in this head. I was like, right, I need to, I need to just go in open minded with this kind of story, having very little idea of what the story of Dracula
Yeah.
was. And yeah, which is holy shit. Robert Egger can just he can make a film, right? And
He can make a film. He's
it's
proven that.
it's so funny where um, I'll get onto this when we do our next episode because I'll tell a wee story when we're talking about our best films of the year. But I've
Mhm.
gone so many times of watching a film and going, God, this is crap. And then like watching a film next week and going, like, oh my God, people can make good cinema. Like it's
Yeah,
just
it's yeah.
some people just don't want to.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
some people and you can. And Robert Edgar is one of these guys that even with nothing, right? The
Mhm.
witch, the witch, whatever you want to call it, insane. This film
Yeah,
it's just, I mean, The Lighthouse is also just something. The Northman
yeah.
also just something. He keeps just
His
upping the
production
level
values is just
of
incredible, yeah.
the sets that we have here.
Mhm.
He was always talking about the live rats, but they're just kicking
Yeah.
around.
Yes, hunt thousands of rats in this film.
Incredibly trained. Um,
Yeah.
and just the kind of one thing I liked, just a very subtle nod, is obviously we're set in was it 1830s something? Is it like
Yes. Yeah,
1830? Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and in Germany. And even though everybody's talking English, he's like he still has all the signage in German, and you chuck up
Mm,
you'll
mhm.
get subtitles when, and it's
Uh-huh.
just it's small things like that, and I'm like, oh, thanks for like
Yeah.
keeping me in this kind of like,
And Count Orlok speaks some sort of ancient, strange language,
yeah,
probably maybe ancient German, sort of who knows what kind of
Romanian kind of
yeah,
like
Romanian or yeah,
very like
some
a
sort of
mixture of each.
Central or Eastern
Yeah,
European whatever language, yeah.
I would love to know if that was an
Mhm.
actual language or if it's like something because obviously
Yeah,
it's
maybe.
known for cinema
Something
to
they made
make
up.
up a language. The
Yeah,
Elvins
yeah,
did it, the
yeah.
Avatar did it. So I mean, I don't know if
Star
you
Trek did it.
Star Trek
Yeah.
did it. Yeah. So
Mhm,
yeah, and getting into kind of that. Obviously, the sets and everything I'm saying are incredible, but the
mhm,
performances. Nicholas
mhm.
Hoult, right?
Yeah.
Insane. I think he is just. I'm going to say like this year, like we said, he's had Juror number two. Which did you see?
He was great in
You
Juror
saw,
number 2,
yeah, you
yeah.
saw Juror number two.
It was good.
Um,
Mhm.
was he in something else earlier this year? No, the menu was last year. Was the menu last
He was
year?
in the menu,
That was
yeah.
a couple of years ago, actually. Now,
That was a couple of years ago, yeah.
yeah, but
But no, I really like Nicholas Hoult as a performer, actually. I think
he's
he's one of these guys, right,
great.
when you look at him and you think he's not like, I don't know, like the most conventionally, like, A-list looking star,
No,
but
he
he
genuinely looks like a
always has
normal
he just
bloke.
always yeah, and he just has a way of, like, he's just made his way in the industry, and every time he's in a film, he gives it his all. I mean,
Uh-huh.
we've had a few shots of him in the Superman trailer as Lex Luthor, and he's so emotive. That's his thing. He has such
100%. He is
a
one of the
face that
driving
just
factors for that
uh,
film for me because I genuinely
yeah,
think he's an incredible actor, and this, sorry, this
uh
film really does show it.
The yeah, and his ability to show fright and
Mhm.
fear as well is so
And
good, you
as
know? I
I
think he's so good.
as I
Uh-huh.
provided evidence of my
Mhm.
fact I told you the other day was that Harry Styles
Mhm.
was originally meant to play um,
Yeah, that's
Thomas's character,
mind-boggling to me. That's
which is
mind-boggling. Yeah.
absolute save.
Mhm.
Because once
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
one of the things I said about "Don't Worry, Darling" is that when you see a Harry
Mhm.
Styles compared to people who can act,
Yeah.
it's so obvious.
Yeah,
And like
yeah,
even though they're up against Aaron Taylor Johnson, who
yeah.
I personally I was like
I know,
here.
I think he's a bit ropey at times in it, but,
He's a
I
bit
think he's
no,
out of
but
the collection, he's might
his
be
uh,
the weaker one.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I also see his characters that wee bit more like his characters are meant
Yeah,
to be
I
like
know.
a bit of a
He actually kind of has a.
comic
I like Aaron
reliefy.
Taylor Johnson's role, almost because he's the guy. He's like like if it was a comedy, he's like the straight man, the one who's
Yeah,
sort of like everyone else is absurd, and he's the one who's taking it in a rational, serious perspective. And he's kind of like that here, where he's like, "This
yeah.
is all
this is this
nonsense,"
is
and you
ridiculous. You're
kind of
going
feel,
mental.
yeah. And some of his delivery in that front is quite funny, which I liked. But I think just some of the delivery at times, I think, and I know it is purposely like over the top and theatrical because it's just obviously taking a lot of inspiration from its original
Yeah,
source of when the acting was very over the top and theatrical, and that's what Gothic literature's like, and that's what Romantic literature's like. It
yeah.
is very theatrical, over the top, and I get it. But I think for me, out of the performers, I think he might have been the weakest. I'm not saying he's
No,
bad
I
by
know.
any means. I
As
just
the
mean
thing,
like
like
out of
I
the
think it's
ensemble.
probably one of the
Uh-huh.
better, like his best performance I've seen recently
Mm,
in recent years,
uh-huh.
because
Yeah.
he's not done the best films in the world.
Well, Kyle,
Um,
I saw Craven on a rainy Saturday night, and I thought he was better in that.
did you see Craven?
I've not seen. No, I've
Oh
not
my
seen Craven.
god! Right, we're gonna start the year off bad here. But yeah,
Yeah.
like everything from, I mean, kind of Orlok,
Mhm.
Scar.
Interesting look. Mhm.
Huh? Interesting.
Interesting look.
Can I right, sorry, I'm
Okay.
gonna derail for 2 minutes here, right?
Okay.
I've been thinking, so right,
Mhm.
for context, he has a moustache. A
Yes,
very
minor spoilers.
bushy,
Nosferatu has a mustache in
I
this.
don't think that's
Huge
a
mustache.
spoiler. Is it?
I
Is
said
it?
minor. Some people might consider that a spoiler that of
Uh
his look that he has a mustache.
yeah,
I mean, he
okay.
shows up literally in the first 3 minutes of the film. So,
Yeah.
um,
So right, the thing is, for me, my one jarring issue with this film is that
okay.
and I know people are like, oh, it's just a mustache, but for some reason it literally like sat in my head. I came
Uh-huh.
home, FaceTime my girlfriend, was talking about the film, and I went,
Mhm.
I just talked about the mustache for 3 minutes. I was like, I don't know what it was, and I figured it out. It makes him
Uh-huh.
look too human for me,
Yeah. Okay.
which
But
is the issue that I had. So no, but hear me out here. So
mhm, mhm.
the hair strands on the head, I was
Yeah,
like,
he's got like
oh,
one little patch of hair.
it's like
Yeah.
one little patch of hair, but we have a full
Mhm,
bushy mustache that's not like
mhm.
corroded or anything. It's perfect. It's a bit
Yeah.
overgrown. You can trim it back,
Yeah.
but for
He's
some reason,
overgrown.
I
Yeah.
just looked at it and I was like,
Uh-huh.
call out to Jesus here. He points to the thing saying bald Borat, and I'm like, I cannot unsee
Yeah.
that. It's like a
He doesn't
bald.
look like Borat. There's
Oh,
many characters who had
I tell
mustaches.
you, it was like if it's like it was Mario went for
Mhm.
vampire thing. But no, my
Yeah.
my main thing was that I realized for me it made it look too human for what this kind of
Mhm.
mentory
Yeah.
monster was meant to be. Because when you
Yeah,
like,
but he is human in a way.
no, he's got some human aspects, but yeah, I mean, I like I
Mhm,
said, like I know exposure to it before. The only thing I
mhm,
knew was like I saw the wee still
mhm.
of the original character. Probably saw him in SpongeBob when I was a kid because he shows up in that a few
Yeah.
times,
Yep.
and that's just kind of what I expected a wee bit more. And obviously, that is it's a very much an homage to that kind of character,
Yeah.
and especially when you go side on the shadow, and they do great
Uh-huh.
shadow work here, like insane shadow
Yeah,
work,
absolutely.
some
Yeah.
creepy ass shots.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I was just a bit thrown by the mustache, and
Yeah.
I thought it was a very
Good for him.
bold choice.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
apart from the mustache, that's my
Yeah.
mustache rant over.
The
Um,
mustache rant, it took 15 minutes. No, I'm kidding.
I could go on, but
But
no,
yeah,
yeah,
I mean, we both talked about a lot of performances there. I think, like we're saying, the majority of the cast is very good. Lily Rose Depp, as
oh
well,
my god,
has a lot to do, and a lot. The whole film kind of hinges on her performance, and I think she
yeah,
does an absolutely terrific job. Her and Holt, kind of whole have to hold up this
hmm
whole drama and horrible circumstances happening to all these people. They have to hold that together, and really her as well, because hers is very having to deal with like a lot of body work and
yeah,
is some nudity for her as well. And I mean, look, we actually talked about the Idol weirdly enough after this because she was the star of that show and that
that
was
was
a
the
train
show,
wreck of a
yeah.
show. But to be fair, and I have watched this first episode of that show
Oh,
because I
did
wanted
you?
to see how bad it was. I did watch it, yeah. And she was not the problem of that show. It
Right,
was everything, and it was
everything
the
else.
whole the writing of it and the weekend, and he's a terrible actor. But it wasn't her because the first shot of that show is actually her having to just express through her face, and there's no dialogue. Um, so she's to me always proven that she is good, and she was excellent here. I mean, we're talking like her; she's having to contort her body like it's The Exorcist or like it's Possession or even The First Omen, which came out last year. I bet
Yeah,
that sort of manic body work, of course, is a lot of inspiration of Possession in The First Omen. But yeah, I thought she was terrific. She could even be really scary at times as well. So I really, really
yeah,
loved her
really,
performance.
really
But
creepy.
what what this mainly got for me as well, right, Kel? Because I mentioned this a year ago when we talked about Killers of the Flower Moon. I know, bear with me. It's very weird actually when you have expectations for a film and the film just meets exactly what you wanted it to be.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a weird feeling because usually films either they aren't not as good as you expect them to be, they exceed your expectations, you know nothing about them, and it's a
One of the
splendid time.
two, yeah.
Yeah, usually along that thing. But when you have high expectations for a project, like I said with Killers of the Flower Moon, and then the deliverance of it and the way you imagined it in your head is how it happened, it feels amazing.
It really
And like
does.
Robert Eggers is 4 for 4. Like his ability to create this folk horror, like well, he did folk horror in The Witch. You know, he did like sort of ancient fable work in The Northman. And now here he's doing this grand gothic tale, which is a slightly theatrical, over the top. The sets are fantastic. It's dark and brooding. It's
Yeah.
candlelight. It's like natural lights in there. It's got the weird sexiness of like Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula,
Yeah.
with the crazy violence of that, as well as obviously taking huge inspiration from the original F.W. Murnau film, with, you know, literally recreating the shadowy shots and whatever else.
Beautiful.
But really, what he does as well is that Count Orlok becomes, and Bill Skarsgård said this in an interview as well, is that he doesn't want to play a character this evil again, because they really dial up how evil he is in this film.
Oh,
And that's the
yeah.
thing, like the whole original Dracula story is kind of about good versus evil, but a lot of the adaptations we've gotten of that story, this feels the most evil, right? Because even the Gary Oldman, like I said, the Francis Ford Coppola one, fantastic, beautiful film, but he's kind of cool. Like, that's kind of, maybe he's not super evil. He's just like, Gary Oldman's fucking great.
Yeah.
Even though if he's like a weird beast and doing the whole sort of like like the possession and these, essentially, you know, there's a whole allegory for sexual assault here, and that's kind of what you get with this when you get an evil figure, and the dialogue is very purposeful about that whole sort of like sexual assault angle, because you have the Ellen character who's essentially been haunted, and, you know, at times, you know, for her, in her head, everything is happening for real, and is sort of kind of being raped by this Count Orlok figure. And
Yeah.
they really, that's what they lean into more in this one than they have in previous Dracula ones, or the original Nosferatu, or the Werner Herzog 70s Nosferatu. And I really like how evil they make him in this.
Yeah. He is a
And it's
very
what,
creepy
and
character.
yeah, and what I'll just say before we kind of round off here, is what I really appreciate as well is that every version of the Nosferatu story has done something different with the Nosferatu character, or the way it's all three of them are stylized differently. And I love you now have a collection of films, all 50, weirdly 50 years apart from one another,
Yeah.
and you get something different from each of them. And I'd say this is probably like, this is second best to me, with the original being the top one. Werner Herzog one is like a depressed vampire story about a vampire who literally just wants to die. It's a little bit different. But yeah, I had a phenomenal time. I thought this was a fantastic film. And Robert Eggers,
Yeah.
I would love to see him do a rom-com next, honestly.
Well,
Because
no,
who knows how that would look.
that's something I
Mhm.
wanted to ask you, actually, just before we get into
Mhm.
what would you like. So bear in mind that he's obviously kind of his most two recent films, 'cause obviously The Northman
Mhm.
was the last, have been
Yeah.
somewhat. Obviously, The Northman, like we discussed, has been was an adaptation of Hamlet, an
Yeah.
adaptation of an well, because obviously it's the original source,
Yeah, of
isn't
the
it?
original fable
You know,
sort of thing, yeah.
it's
Uh-huh.
got some sort of source material around it.
Mm.
This one,
Yeah.
is there anything like of a source material that you would want to see Robert Edgar have a go at?
Mm.
Because I saw somebody.
See, he's... Yeah, so no, go ahead.
I saw somebody post something where they suggested something like a darker story, almost like a dramatization of the Phantom of the Opera, and I was like, right, okay,
Mm.
I get where you're going there.
He could do, yeah, it'd
He
be
could do
good, yeah.
something like that, because obviously he was originally going to do. He was trying to do a Frankenstein, but he could never get
Yeah.
it done. And then
Yeah, I know
obviously
Guillermo del Toro is doing
Guillermo
that, so,
is doing it. But is there
yeah.
anything that you would like him to see kind of give a crack at in the
Honestly,
future?
that's the thing. It's one of these weird things where it's like, you know, when we talk about like filmmakers being stuck in like a franchise and you kind of
Yeah.
want them to move on, like I'm happy Ryan Coogler is doing that Sinners film and not just
Yes.
doing another like Black Panther film, or like can I, like how I wanted, I wish James Cameron didn't stick to
Avatar.
Avatar
Yeah.
forever. That makes me kind of sad. But the weird thing with Robert Eggers is he is kind of in this genre of like folk and horror, myths and weird fables, and everything is sort of bizarre and over the top, and I love that stuff. I mean, there are obviously there are tweaks and differences. I mean, The Lighthouse is not like Nosferatu, and the
Yeah.
Northman isn't like Nosferatu, but they're all still dark and gritty and based on like these old fables. But he could just stick to just doing that for the rest of his career, and I'm sure they'd all be great. I
Yeah.
mean, would it be interesting to see him do like a sci-fi film or like a, just a
Oh my
traditional
god,
drama?
get him to do
Absolutely.
Thunderbirds. I think that's the revamp we need in the future.
I mean,
100%.
he's one of these filmmakers now where I think he could do anything, and
Mm.
I'd be so happy. It could literally be sticking to this old fable folk stuff he loves to do, or it could be something completely different. But before we get to scores, let's just briefly talk about box office, right? Because
Yep.
like we're talking about, his last film, The Northman, had a budget of about $70 to $90 million. That film was not successful. That film lost that studio money. However, they dropped the budget a little bit on this one. Nosferatu was budgeted at $50 million. Could you believe it? It looks fantastic.
You
It
know,
looks so much better
I know
than
there's
so
very
many big blockbuster films that came out last year.
even compared to the Northman, I know they're very two different films, but I was like,
Yeah.
I'm visually more like enthralled in this
Mm.
world because obviously it's very
And
different.
Nosferatu.
Yeah,
And
but
Nosferatu.
I
Yeah.
look at Nosferatu and I think it has a higher budget than the Northman.
Really? I don't know. The Northman's, it feels big for what it is,
yeah,
for being the budget is.
it does, but for some reason for me, I'm
Mm.
just in the world where
I know
Nosferatu
Nosferatu
is.
has that's the thing. It has a big scale to it. It feels
Uh-huh.
massive, and we saw it in the IMAX, to be fair, but even still, it feels huge. Even like the shots where it's like Nicholas Hoult overlooking the village on the snowy mountain, or like when he's arriving at the castle, or the chariot arriving, and all these
Yeah.
things, and the rats, the plague, and everything. It feels big.
And I
But
love
yeah,
Willem
so 50
Dafoe
mil.
as well.
Oh,
Just
and
that just
Willem
we
Dafoe, of
haven't
course. Oh
mentioned
yes, we
him.
didn't really mention Willem. I know.
He was brilliant.
So yes, $50 million. It's grossed now. It came out Christmas Day in America. It came out New Year's Day for the rest of the world. But now $100 million worldwide in just under 2 weeks for this
Brilliant.
film, which is fantastic. I honestly didn't think this film would make money because I just thought it would be too weird and whatever else that a lot of people
Seems
wouldn't be
to
interested. But
it seems to be going
uh-huh.
on a lot of word of mouth I've seen, especially
Yeah.
like in my
Mhm.
kind of friend group. A lot of people have been here like, oh, I heard it's quite good. I might go and see it, and
Yeah.
they have.
Mhm.
And some of them might not have liked it. Some of them might be going, "What was that?" Like not expected it
Yep.
to, be
Uh-huh.
what it was. But
Uh-huh.
I'm glad it is getting the exposure because it is such an amazing gothic horror
Yeah. Yeah.
romance.
And so what are you giving it out of 10, Kyle? What
It's
are we giving this film?
do you know what? It's weird. As we'll discuss in the next episode, we've started the last 2 years off fairly strong.
Yeah.
Comparing what
January's always in the UK.
yeah,
January's always great because we get all the premium
all
award
the
stuff that's
premium
been left
awards has
over
been
from
delayed.
America. So January's a fantastic
Yeah,
film month for us.
I'm gonna give this a 9 out of 10. It was
Yeah.
just an insane film. It's one that I'm like, right, that's a 4K purchase. I'm gonna get in the physical media.
Yeah. You
I
want it.
heard
You
there's gonna
want
be
it.
an extended edition actually on the physical media.
Are you serious?
No, I'm genuinely being serious.
Oh, right, okay.
Robert Eggert confirmed that the physical version would have a extended cut.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Cool. Well,
what about
like you're saying, that'll
yourself?
be
Yeah.
a next Christmas gift from you, maybe. Yeah, I've got to agree, Kyle. It's a 9 out of 10. It's another home run for Robert Eggers. For me, it's what I wanted it to be: grand, gothic, crazy, fantastic vampire tale. And yeah, it's the Nosferatu tale. If you've seen the original silent film, it is that tale, just dialed up, gore fest, more sexuality
Yep.
involved in it, more evil. But it's up there. It's great. I mean, it's I'm sure F.W. Morna and maybe Bram Stoker himself would be proud of sort of the work that has been put into this film. But yes, that will round off today's episode. So thank you very much, Kyle, for joining me.
Sorry, yeah, I've got a confirmed article saying that there is going to be an extended cut.
Oh, right.
Okay,
Is that what you're
I was concerned. I was like, did I make that up? Yes, no, thank you very much. A really great
Yes.
film to start 2025.
Exactly. And we'll be back very soon, actually, with another video and podcast episode coming up. Of course, we best and worst film of 2024. January got right these things. So yes, that'll be on the episode. So, with our opinion on at the end of the day, those were thank you.
Thank you.